Good afternoon and welcome to today's HR Observer webinar on Death of Appraisal. We're led today by Charles Wilson, and I'll hand over to you in a moment. I'll hand over to him in a moment. But just before we do that, I want to run you through a few housekeeping rules just for everything to go smoothly. That's our agenda, just 5 items on it, and they're very, very simple. But what I want to talk you through is to let you know that the slides for the webinar, as well as the entire recording, will be made available to you when we send out our follow-up emails, and these usually go out within the week. So the slides will be on our slide share page. The webinar will be on our YouTube channel. When we finish, our survey will pop up, and I would just ask that you take a few minutes just to answer that survey and to give us your feedback. And we very much appreciate that. While you're listening to Charles, you may have some questions that you think of, and if you notice on your control panel towards the bottom, there's a little box for questions. Feel free to type your questions in as Charles speaks, and then he will allocate time at the end to answer them. So please do think of questions that you might want to ask. And that's all that I have to say to you. I'll hand you over to Charles now. Thank you for being on an informal webinar.
Thank you very much indeed, Sherry, and good afternoon, everybody, or good day, everybody, wherever you are. So, my name is Charles Wilson, and I've worked with Informa, formerly IIR, for many years. And why have I chosen this rather catchy title, The Death of Appraisal? Well, I've chosen it for the very simple reason that my research shows that appraisal, in general, is not being done well. So let's have a look at what we can improve, what are we expecting from appraisal, and so on. First of all, the question is, what do we want to achieve with appraisal? Okay, so you might ask, first of all, how has it gone? And seek opinions. Whose opinions? The opinions of the employee and the opinions of the employer. Now, I'm going to refer to appraisal because that's the classic term that we use. Now, I'm aware that other people have got other fancy names for it, but we all understand what appraisal means. We want to measure and we want to look at objectives, and we want to look at that in a very simple way. Have people achieve their objectives on the line or below the line or above the line? So it's a bit like doing a budget. Out of that, I would hope that we would get some form of gap analysis and an identification of training needs. Now, if the human resources organization is working properly, it should be analyzing what comes into appraisal and taking out of that the training needs of the organization. We'd also like to set up some new objectives, and those objectives hopefully will be agreed, not set, because in modern performance appraisal, the performance appraisal interview isn't that. It isn't an interview, it's a discussion, and people are meeting, or should be meeting, almost on an equal level. We want an answer to, is the person in the promotion bracket? Yes or no? That's very simple. Are they going to move on? Are they going to be moved along their grade, or are they going to be moved up 1 or 2 if your procedures allow that? And also a salary step. Are people going to take a salary step, yes or no? And hopefully it should be a motivational way ahead. However, my experience shows that in the main, appraisal, as it's done in the classic form, is not a motivational way ahead. And in fact, in most cases, it can be a demotivator. Are we doing the job we are paid to do, and at what standard? I'm sorry about that interruption. That's a bit of computer speak. Are we doing the job we are paid to do, and at what standard? That's really the bottom line. So are our staff doing the job that they are paid to do? Are we getting a return on our investment, and at what standard is that return? So let's look at the key principles, or what I think are the key principles in performance management. The process of performance management should create value, not destroy it. So when we are appraising our people, hopefully at the end of that appraisal process, we have increased their value. Now, there are only, in my view, three assets in business, and those assets are money, things, and people. Some people say, well, time's an asset as well. It is, but the way in which people manage their time is what's important, and therefore I think time is within people's gift. So I come down to what managers manage is people and the materials and the money, and all managers manage that. And hopefully, when people are taken into your company, they increase in value. They do not, as material does, get written down in value. Now, performance measurement, performance management should fit with the simple goals of your company being effective, working at high levels.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Performance management fits with the goals of being effective. Now, if you're being effective, you're making profit or you're increasing your service. The efficiency of the organization, it should give you some measures of quality, and it should be done in an equal and fair way. By equity, I don't mean equity from the financial point of view, but being equal and fair. Right, just a minute. We're having a bit of technical difficulty. Now, here we are. Now, the primary aim of performance management, what are we looking for in performance management? Well, we're looking to improve quality and to measure performance so that we can get some aspect of the results. It allows us to focus on our targets. Where are we now? Where do we want to be? Are we achieving what we want to achieve? And it should motivate. Now, my experience is that that is not the case. That in the main, performance appraisal is a demotivator and not a motivator. And that is why we're here talking about the death of appraisal. It should also be a supportive mechanism. Now, that depends on the culture of your organization. If you're a Jack Welch type organization where you fire the bottom 5% of your company every year, then that is your corporate value. However, what I'm suggesting in modern human resources management is that you should be giving support to your people, and even if they drop below the line, you've invested some money in them, are you going to get them back above the line? And it should be conducted in the spirit of openness. Now, the negatives in appraisal, let's have a look at that. The way in which appraisal is conducted at the moment is a drive towards standardization. Why do I say that? Because, of course, and I'll come back to this, we put people into boxes, don't we? It is also a system of apportioning blame. When things go wrong, it is then easy to find out who went wrong and not to look at it and say, that went wrong, how can we do it better in the future? But to say, that went wrong and start getting the big stick out. So it has become, in my view, a top-down departmental process of accountability and nothing more. Now, let's have a look at some international opinions. I've tried to gather some figures for you here, and these figures come, an amalgam of mine in the first one, that 23% thought themselves to be above average in the conduct of reviews. 23% only. Now, the following two figures are from some work which was done by Stanford University, that 95% of managers were dissatisfied with the appraisal system. 90% of human resources heads, and I'm making an assumption that a number of you listening in are in that situation, said that it did not yield accurate information, and it was not identifying and managing talent. The common criticisms levelled at the classical appraisal system are that it is misleading, it's complex, and I've certainly come across that. I've come across appraisal forms which are 10 pages long. They are simple tick boxes with very little white space for managers and employees to express their opinions. I'm challenging you to look at the time and money that you spend on appraisal. Now, a lot of time and money is spent. Let's just take an example. A manager might spend 2 hours gathering the so-called evidence, and then maybe an hour talking to the person concerned. So that's 3 hours of your company's time. Multiply that by the number of your employees, and you see how much you're spending on it. And classical appraisal is damaging to people because it's not being done well. Challenge for you: are you right now training your appraisers? And better still, are you right now training your appraisees? Because very few people do that. Appraisal is a skill. It needs to be taught. And to be appraised also needs to be taught and to be trained for. Let's continue with our key questions. Why do it? Well, I'm asking you that, and that's a challenge to you. Why are we doing this thing? What is being achieved? Look at what you are spending in terms of the costs, time, money, and the damage that you may be doing to the morale of your people if you are not doing your appraisal well. And my experience shows that that is the case, that the majority of appraisal is simply not done well. What information should we be gathering? Well, you should get an approximate indication as to the quality of your people. How many people have we got who are excellent, very good, good, etc. The problem is, of course, that managers are weak, and wherever you go, if you do a simple bell curve of appraisal results, you'll find that the majority are skewed towards the right, that instead of the majority being in good, which is where they should be, the majority are in very good or excellent, and that is because managers are weak. Or if your appraisal is linked to money, there's 40 years of research to show that if appraisal is linked only to money, it will fail. It needs to be linked to cash and to people's personal development. I do find also that the information which is gathered with regard to training need is limited. Why is that so? That is because HR doesn't do its job properly and doesn't gather from the appraisal results all that is necessary from the training need point of view. If various departments identify a common training need, then is that being bought centrally because it's being identified by HR so that you can go out and you can buy your training more cost effectively? Or are managers simply going out and buying the training individually, therefore costing you a great deal more money? Succession planning. Well, your appraisal should be gathering succession planning information. It should be looking at those people who are moving on. Now, succession planning is not about recognizing your stars. It's about recognizing those people who are possibly moving on to the next grade or the next promotion. So it covers everybody, not just your stars. So are we gathering that because we are doing appraisal properly? My experience would indicate that that is not the case. Is there going to be a movement in pay because the person is promoted? So are they going to move along a pay band, or are they going to move up one grade or 2 grades if you allow that? It should identify your problem people. Now, in the main, it's more successful at identifying problem people than it is at identifying those people who are doing a solid day's work for you and those people who you want to move on. So the key question is, how much actual work measurement is done? Do you know what is being achieved in your organization through the appraisal system? I want to talk about ranking, and I want to talk about forced ranking. Now, forced ranking is a system whereby some senior manager, because he feels he wants to distribute the budget as evenly as possible, says to the subordinates, you can have 2 excellents, 5 very goods, and the rest have got to be good or below that. That is iniquitous. It is one of the worst systems in the world, but it remains the common system. It looks good, but it's not. It triggers fight or flight. So the majority of people may very well react to an enforced grading, and they will react negatively, or they will simply put their heads down and say, oh, well, you know, it's that stuff that the manager does every year, or it's that stuff that comes out of HR every year. It's misused because it's a subjective opinion masked by so-called evidence, which people are trying to gather. And usually the evidence concerned is gathered at the last minute as opposed to being gathered over the period of the appraisal, which may be 6 months, it may be a year. It puts people straight away into boxes. If you give somebody a very good, or you give them a good, which end of good and which end of very good are they at? If you give them a good, are they in the middle? Are they almost very good? Or are they nearly below the line? It is seen as being consistent to match performance and reward, but that would only be the case if it were done really well, and forced ranking does not do that. What it misses out on is the fact that we are all people. Now, simple question, how do you find it as a human being? Personally, when I am badly appraised, and that is the majority of the situation, I find it demotivating. And when I am appraising people, I find it exhausting unless I have a really good appraisal system with which to appraise my people. So we've been at this for many years. So what have we missed down the years? We've obviously missed the target somewhere. So let's have a look at some of the misses, which I think are extant. The first miss is us and how we feel. You're a human being, I'm a human being, we have feelings. Does the appraisal system, as it's constructed at the moment, actually treat us as human beings? And in the majority of cases, that's not the case. Ranking, forced ranking, produces an aggressive defense situation. And even the best of intentions can sometimes go wrong. Let's take that as an example. The manager says to the subordinate, I'm pleased to say that you are ranked good this year. Now, the subordinate immediately knows that he or she is in a box. And they know the system. People are not silly. The employee knows the system and will assume, quite rightly, that others were ranked very good or even excellent. So to say, I am pleased to say that you are ranked good this year, has actually achieved demotivation, not motivation. And the employee knows the other people who he is or she is working amongst, and when he or she sees someone graded excellent, and they know full well that their contribution has not been at an excellent standard because they're working in the same team, then they get further demotivated. So this whole business of putting people into boxes worries me enormously. The result is that you get a demoralized workforce. Now, the second miss is the business of the mindsets about growth and learning. Now, this is a piece of Stanford thinking. I was there a couple of weeks ago. And Stanford came up with the idea that we look at learning, we look at growth in two ways. One, fixed. You're born smart or not. What you can achieve is what you can achieve, and that's it. Or two, you grow. You can learn, you can grow, and you can improve. Tragically for all of us, what they found was that in the world of work, the fixed attitude prevails. Now, if that's the case, and we are simply looking at our employees as being reaching their capacity very quickly, and that's it, they can't do any more, then, of course, the majority of our people are going to avoid any stretching goals. Why? Because they will see that as an invitation to fail. So what can we do? Let's have a rethink about this business of appraisal. We need to listen to our staff more. We need to talk to people in a structured way, not going through a series of tick boxes. We need to look at facts. What has the member of staff achieved? What progress have they made? And we need to look at measurable outcomes for teams and individuals. Now, you can only do that if you have a really well-defined competency system. And if you haven't got your competencies defined, that's where to start. Define your competencies and define them at the levels that you want in your performance management system. So if somebody is going to get a very good in one department, the competencies are defined, the competencies are similar in another department, and therefore the language is going to be the same that people use. A lot of teams nowadays are doing self-direction. They don't have a leader as such. So how can they do it? Well, they can do self-appraisal, they can do team appraisal, and they can do it in the same way, talking amongst themselves and taking a structured way forward. We need to keep what is working, and what is working is the selection of objectives. And I say selection because I don't say setting, because objectives should be agreed. We know we've got SMART objectives, I'm sure you all know that. But objectives should be agreed, which brings me back to the attitude of the appraisal actual discussion. Are managers setting objectives, or are they talking to their people and saying, okay, where are we going next? Some goal setting, and you can't do it unless you've got clear competency definition. Now, a lot of people use a menu approach to competency. And what does that mean? It means that you've defined your competencies, you sit down, subordinate and manager, and work out how the subordinate's work is to be measured over the coming period. So you select the competencies with which you want to be measured. We need to remove the threat. We need to provide guidelines to structured conversations, and we need to talk. Now, you've been sent some guidelines, and I want to take you through them. It's a Word document, which you've all got, I hope. So, to be completed by an employee prior to discussion with the immediate head. Good question to ask. How do you think it's going? What's been my most important achievement? What I enjoy about work and what I don't. What I find easy and what I find difficult. What interests me and what does not. What competencies am I using well or not so well? What competencies do I wish to be measured? Or what skills or abilities am I not using? That is one of the questions which is rarely asked in any appraisal situation. What else can you bring to this? People look at job descriptions and they look at them as though they were chipped in concrete. They are not. People should be growing their job descriptions. And it's often useful to ask at selection interview, what else can you do? At the actual discussion, then the primary aim is to measure, to manage, and to prepare the way ahead. So range across the points that I've just given you. Look at the job description and discuss its changes. That is, its development. Where is it going from here? Because if you treat your job descriptions as though they were concrete, you'll never get anywhere. Examine the progress of objectives. Measure the outcomes and the output. Develop competency discussion and choose the next competencies. And that, I suggest, should be mutual. Examine what value has been added for customers, clients, team, etc. What professional development has taken place. And look at the approaches to the values of the organization. Your organization should declare its values. So let's insert those into the discussion and see how the employee is measuring up to those values. What learning and development is needed for the coming period? Are they in a bracket for promotion? What pay is going to be linked to this discussion? And where are we going next? So that, I think, gives you some outline as to what we should be doing. Now that, in my view, should be taking place in a discussion between the manager and the employee. Clearly, we need to record that. So you may say, well, that's an appraisal system in itself. Well, yes, it is, but it's much less structured than a form with ticking boxes. So we need to monitor the progress or lack of it, and we need to train for feedback, for people giving us feedback and for giving feedback, not boxing people, not putting people into these interminable boxes of whatever it happens to be, poor, satisfactory, good, very good, excellent, or whatever fancy names you choose, because people do choose things like, up to the standard, not quite up to the standard and all that. That to me is not on. So we need to look at the growth mindset. How can we move our people on and accept that even the lowest of our ranks will rise ultimately. Remember, you might be sitting next to the managing director of 20 years' time. So what to do? Scrap the structured approach. Move to some form of continuous feedback, rather like continuous professional development. Look at some shared responsibility. Document personal progress and the contribution. Do frequent short feedback sessions. So, dear me, you're saying, well, this is going to cost us more time. But isn't that a normal management function? To sit down and talk to people? Measure against agreed targets, and I do mean agreed, that have been agreed between the manager and the employee. Managing and measuring performance is a constant line management responsibility, or it should be. It's part of everyday work. Not just that walking out of your office as a manager or whatever and saying thank you to somebody is performance management in action. Why? We want to provide high quality management information, without which we cannot measure and we cannot improve. Otherwise, why bother? What are we doing here? So let us think now. What have you got? Re-examine what your traditional appraisal achieves, and do that first, because you really need some measures there. Am I getting my money's worth out of this? Is it worth doing? Examine the cost benefit. Am I getting a return on my investment? So if you are receiving a return on your investment, which I should think is highly unlikely if you're doing the classic appraisal, then what else can you do? And I'm making some suggestions here to you as to what you can do. And does what you're doing fit with your view of tomorrow? Are you doing a clear gap analysis where we are now and where we want to be? And are we measuring the performance of our people to fit the standards that we want to reach tomorrow? Does it reflect your declared values? And as I've just suggested to you in the format, approaches to the values of the organization are important, and insert those values into your documentation so that is the person measuring up to the values or are they not? Is the performance appraisal fit for purpose? Now, if it is and it works, fine. But my experience shows that in the main, usually the performance appraisal is not fit for purpose. It's not fit for purpose because it's badly designed and it's badly conducted by both parties. So let's open the debate and let's seek some views, and that is why we're here. So I'm now going to throw the floor open to you, and let's take it from there to talk about this business of appraisal, to see what you're doing, what you're achieving, what guidance you require. This is pretty controversial stuff, saying to you, get rid of what you're doing now and do something else. So let's move on to some questions. Right. Hi all. Are we going to get certificates from this? Well, am I going to get a certificate? And the answer is no, Suzette, I'm not going to get a certificate, and nor are you. Has it started? I see the slide, but I can't. Well, I hope by now, Imad, that you can hear what's going on. Just a message which says it will begin shortly. Well, I hope you're online now. Is there anyone facilitating? I'm not hearing it. It doesn't seem to be that we're succeeding here. You're right. Well, from the point of view of what we can do next, somebody has asked me earlier this afternoon, where do we start? Well, if you don't start from a competency-based format, then you're in trouble. So if you haven't got your competencies defined, and you haven't got them defined to reflect who is at the top end and who is at the bottom end, you're in trouble. So I think now we're away. Somebody has said, yes, thank you, managed to hear you after the second slide. Okay. Whoops, we're moving on very quickly. So, hi, can I get a hard copy of your slide? Yes, the slideshow is available to you. So somebody's saying, I completely agree with you about the bell curve. I'm in learning and development, and I know our HR ops swear by the curve. But from an engagement and retention perspective, I don't agree with them. However, if there is not a curve, how do you rate people? This is from Sarah Siddiq. Sarah, yes, it's going to be more difficult if you don't put people into some sort of rating. However, let me tell you what I've done in a couple of places. This does not win you any friends if you're in HR. I simply let the managers report based on a competency-based system. Now that means that they will probably end up with the majority of their people in very good, which is usually the case. And in one case, where we were working in a company of 20,000 people, we actually went out to them and said, the majority of your managers should be good. And the majority came back in very good. So let them report. And it's a simple statistical answer. Draw all those answers underneath one bell curve. So you will find that the mean of your bell curve is in fact in very good. You can then do a couple of standard deviations either side of that, and you can pay accordingly if you are going to reward people from a monetary point of view, depending upon their appraisal, in inverted commas, results. From Imad, if you have an appraisal system in place for a long time, I'm sorry, I've lost the question. Wait a minute. It's moving down too fast. Just 1 second, Imad. If you have an appraisal system in place for a long time, how easy or difficult it is to start the change? Difficult is the answer to that, unless you can convince your senior management that it's now time to change. If you want the best writer on change at the moment, that's John Cotter, Managing Change. Have a look at his book and have a look at his 8 steps. And those 8 steps will lead you through the management of change. But it is going to be difficult. Imad has also asked, how many competencies would you say are enough? Too little and too much? Good question, Imad, because, of course, I do see huge lists of competencies, and they are not really effective. Let's have a look at 4 or 5 for the hard skills of the job, 4 or 5 for the soft skills of the job. As you move up the scale into more management positions, then the hard skills may decrease and the soft skills will increase, but not too many. This course will be recorded and we'll be able to hear it. Yes, that's quite correct, Abdul Rahman. You will be able to hear it again. How does the balanced scorecard approach? Yes, I was talking about the balanced scorecard. I was talking about the balanced scorecard only with somebody about 2 hours ago. Unfortunately, the balanced scorecard has now got out of perspective itself. Kaplan and Norton wrote the balanced scorecard with regard to its being a system of management. Unfortunately, Ahmed, it has become a system of measurement, and it's being used as a system of measurement and not as a system of management. If it were used as a system of management, then it would fit precisely with what I'm saying. But unfortunately, it's been misused. Indeed, even Kaplan and Norton, about 5 years after they'd published, came out and said, whoa, guys, you've got it wrong. It's actually a system of management, not a system of measurement. Right, where are we? Mohammed Farhan, competencies are set properly. These are set by HR people, and then management measures against these competencies without informing the appraisee, just to follow the bell shape. Well, if you're in that situation, Mohammed, you're in precisely the negative situation which I've been talking about, and that needs to be changed. When do competency-based appraisal, when you do competency-based appraisal, does it have to be job-specific? We just launched one, and it is more behavioral-based. Yes, you are likely to have some core competencies. For example, every supervisor, every manager will have core competencies, and those will be the soft skills of managing well, i.e. communicating, delegating, leading. However, your engineering manager, your IT manager, your accountants, your lawyers will have specific, job-specific competencies. So the thing comes in 2 parts. So that's my answer to that, Suzette. Zahir has asked, the problem I am facing is that most of the time the managers are biased. How can I eliminate this? get a hold of them and knock their heads together is the answer. Do something with regard to training them. Show them what it is costing the company when they are falsely reporting, because almost inevitably they'll be biased in favor of people that they enjoy working with, that they like. Now, if that is the case, and that is usually the case, it becomes highly subjective, and you want to show what that is costing the company, and to frighten your senior managers with the fact that you are spending too much money. Imad, again, you say it's recommended to have SMART goals, which in turn will help with end-of-year appraisals and ratings, etc. However, it is not always possible to write goals in a SMART format. Are you a fan of goals? Yes, I've said that already, Imad. I am a fan of SMART objectives. Let's face it. Specific, measurable, achievable or agreed, and I had a course recently, the young man from Saudi Arabia, who said that the A that they use is aligned, which I thought was very good. Realistic and timed. Now, any objective should be able to be written in that parlance. What do I think? Yusuf has asked, what do you think of 360-degree appraisal systems? I think they're great, Yusuf, if you've got your top-down appraisal system organized and running. If you haven't, then how on earth can you start doing up appraisal, across appraisal, etc., etc.? So I always advise, get your top-down appraisal system sorted out first of all, and then move on to all these fancy things like peer appraisal and up and down appraisal. Suzette has asked if I have a sample competency form, would it be okay if I sent it to you and get your thoughts on it? With pleasure. Now, Zafar has asked, Mr. Wilson, kindly repeat the first slide. I joined a bit late and I was not able. Well, you can see the slide on the presentation, Zafar, so that you'll be able to catch up with that. Ahmed has asked, how do I convince the management not to have forced ranking? Frighten them. Show them what forced ranking is doing for you from the point of view of reducing the morale of your people. Because if you can do that, and forced ranking, I promise you now, is reducing the morale of your people. It is one of the biggest demotivators in the business. So therefore, if the morale of your people is going down, you are getting disengagement amongst your staff, and the staff are not as productive as they should be. So go and frighten them, do a presentation as to what you can achieve getting rid of forced ranking. What do you mean by top-down? What I mean, Suzette, is the manager appraising the subordinate, okay? Now, that has got to be done, first of all, before you start any of these fancy ideas about 360 and so on. Can I get a sample? No, you can't, Mohammed, because I'm not inside your corporate culture, and therefore I have no idea what would fit with you and what would not. I'd have to get inside your company in order to see what your company values are, to see how you're working, and then I could possibly help you. But there's no point. People download appraisal forms from the internet. Don't do that. Design something, if you're going to do classic appraisal, design something which is suitable for you and fits your company's values. Sarah has said, if I may add some insight, it's really important to add questions related to the appraisal system in your staff annual engagement surveys. That is the one document that our seniors are scared of. Good, well done, Sarah. If you're getting that in, then that's great. Whoops, gone a bit too far. You may have answered this already from Imad. However, what would you suggest to be the best approach? An appraisal system based on the curve, or a system which involves each respective business area being provided a slice of the bonus funds for them to distribute with their departments? Taking into consideration, both tend to affect harmony within the team. Forced ratings tend to be balanced to meet the curve, however it's used because everyone follows this process. Yes, indeed. Now, if you devolve your budget to your various departments, then you will find, of course, that there is a disparity between departments. And where departments work together, you'll find that people suddenly realize that somebody in a department with whom they work, perhaps an internal customer of some sort, is being paid more than they are, or received a bigger bonus than they. HR needs to do its job, and I am all in the favor of centralizing the results so that HR can then produce a curve. It may be in the way in which I've suggested, get everybody to appraise, and then produce your own curve, where the mean will not be in good. It'll be in very good. And then with a bit of statistics involved, you can produce something which is worthwhile. Right, where are we? Does 8 competency, 5 in core and 3 in behavioral, is it adequate or should we still reduce it to 6? Don't worry about the numbers. This is Ahmed. Don't worry about the numbers, Ahmed. What is important is not to have too many. So it doesn't matter. If you are using behavioral competencies, then your managers are likely to have more of those than they are technical competencies. Lower down the scale, you're likely to have an even distribution of core competencies and specific competencies for the particular discipline of work involved. All right, where are we now? Yes, do you advise, this is Imad again, do you advise to have managers and employees in separate workshops when coaching about the process of appraisals, or do you suggest to have them in the same session? Right. One of the important things here is this business of communication. And if you are selling the idea of a competency-based appraisal right across the company, then sell it to everybody, but then train your managers and train your employees separately to be able to do appraisal in the manager's case and to be appraised in the case of the employees. This is Zahir again. What are the most important job factors to be evaluated during the appraisal? Where are we? All right, whoops. I'm not succeeding here. During the appraisal. We're at the end, I think. What are the most important job factors to be evaluated during appraisal? Mohammed Zakir. What you need to look at, Mohammed, is what is important to you. Now, you will have competencies which are vital to your organization. The core competencies of management are fairly common. Communication, delegation, etc. So those need to be evaluated for every manager. The job factors which are specific to a particular job need to be looked at. You use an expression job factors. I might assume from that you're working on the Hay system. If you are, then that's fine, so that you've got some factors within the jobs to be looked at. So there's no list of what's most important, because you will have behavioral competencies and you will have skills competencies. Look carefully at those and what fit with your corporate values and take it from there. Right, are we at the end? Anybody else want to add anything? Okay, well, if you're interested in all of this, let me say that I'm around, if you're in the Middle East, I'm around in the Middle East, and my next certificate in HR skills, 1 and 2, if you look on the Informa website, is at the Radisson Royal here in Dubai, the 6th to the 10th of September and the 13th to the 17th of September. We also have a concentrated program between the 23rd and the 27th of August, when we will be discussing the role of HR. That is a certificate in HR skills, which is accredited by the George Washington University. And there are also employee relations, which of course is central to this. And my employee relations courses between the 7th, 11th of June and the 1st to the 5th of November here in Dubai. If you're in Doha by any chance, then I shall be in Doha later in the year with my certificate in HR1 and my certificate in HR2. And that is between the 6th and the 10th of September in Doha and the 13th to the 17th of September in Doha. So if you're interested in talking to me further, I would be delighted to exchange views with you at those events. Look forward to meeting you. Thank you very much indeed.